Welcome all. In this video I will demonstrate a function that adds 1 to each number in a vector. So let's have a look how that function looks like. So we create a function and the name of that function will be increase numbers by 1. So again, the goal of this function is to increase all the numbers by 1, and the input of this function is the numbers. So this function gets one input which contains all the numbers and has one output which are the numbers increased by 1. So again, we have a function. The name of this function is increase numbers by 1. It has one input, which are the numbers, and the outputs are again these numbers, but all increased by 1. So let's implement this in code. So therefore we write a function here above the main function. And first we have to think about the data type of its output. So in this case, it's the numbers increased by 1. And we have here a single output, and this output contains numbers. So therefore we use the data type vector of integers. Yeah, so a vector can contain multiple numbers, and to let it contain multiple numbers we have to use the data type integer. Yeah, so this data type contains multiple numbers. So now we have to define the name of the function, which is increase numbers by 1. Then rounded brackets, and between the rounded brackets we define the input of the function, which is in this case numbers. So again, we will have one input, and this input contains multiple numbers, and therefore we use the data type vector of integers again. And the input name is numbers. Yeah, so again, we have a function named increase numbers by 1. It returns a vector of integers because it returns all the numbers which are increased by 1. And the input is a vector of numbers. Yeah, and all these numbers have to be increased by 1. That's the goal of this function. So how we can implement this function is as follows. So we write a for loop, and the idea here is to iterate over each number in the vector and add 1 to it. So therefore we have to use the following syntax. So by using this syntax we iterate over each number, and for each number we have to increase it by 1. And to do this we have to use the following statement, which is numbers with index I is numbers with index I plus 1. So I get here the current value in numbers for one of the numbers in the vector. Then I add 1 to it, and the result is being copied into this element here. So therefore it's overwritten, and therefore the number is increased by 1. And finally we have to return the vector with the increased numbers from this function, and we do that by using the keyword return and then numbers. So this function allows us to pass a vector of numbers because we have one input here. Then the function adds 1 to each of these numbers, and then it returns the numbers. So now we have to call this function to use it. So to use this function we have to type the name of the function, which is increase numbers by 1. So we can say here increase numbers by 1, then rounded brackets, and then we have to pass a vector with numbers. However, we do not have a vector with numbers yet, so therefore we have to make one first. So to make one we make a vector of integers. We call the vector or this variable v. Then we can add numbers to this vector by using the pushback function. So we can say v dot and then pushback. And then we add some random numbers to this vector. Like this. And now we can pass this vector to the function. Yeah, and so what this function does, it increases each number in this vector here and then returns that vector. However, we do not do anything with the returned vector yet. So what we can do is say here vector of integers is v increased is equal to the output of this function here. Yeah, so what happens here is that when we reach the statement, first here the function is being called. So what happens from this place, from this position here, it jumps to the function here above. Furthermore, the vector v is being copied into this vector here, numbers. Then with this for loop, all the numbers are increased by 1. Finally, this vector is being returned, and the return vector, so the return value of this function, is being copied into this vector here. So in the vector v underscore increased. So now we can print the vector. So we print this vector to check whether all these elements are being increased by 1. So therefore we iterate over each element in this vector, and therefore we have to use the following syntax. So we have to use this syntax to iterate over each element in this vector here. And then we can print each element using the following syntax. So we use the name of the vector, then square brackets, and in between the index. And since I iterates from 0 until this value, so the number of values in v increased, -1, because we have less than here, we get each element from this vector here, and therefore we print each element in this vector. So let's run this program. And what you see, it prints 6, 11, -19, 6, and 7, which is the same list as here, but then +1. Furthermore, what we see is that we print here the vector, and also printing a vector, we can make a function for that. So what we can do is make a function. We can name this function print values or print numbers, whatever you want to call it. And the input of this function are numbers. And this function just prints the numbers on the console, and therefore it has not to return anything, so it has no output. So the function name is print numbers, so the goal of the function is to print the numbers on the console, and as an input it gets the numbers that has to be printed on the console. So therefore we can make a function, which we also make here above the main function. As we see, it has no output, so therefore we use the keyword void. The name of the function is print numbers, then rounded brackets, and then curly brackets. And between the rounded brackets we define the input of the function, which is numbers. And the data type of this input is again a vector of integers. So to print all the numbers we can use a for loop with the following syntax. So with this syntax we iterate over each number in the vector, and to print it we use this statement here. So with this statement we print each number in the vector. So now instead of using the for loop here, what we can do is call the function here above, so the function print numbers. Then rounded brackets, and between the rounded brackets we have to define the inputs, which is a single input in this case, which is a list with numbers. And we want to print here the phi increased factor, so therefore we have to pass this factor here. So now this factor will be printed. All the elements in this factor will now be printed. So let's run this program. And now you see the same result. So it prints again 6, 11, minus 19, 6, and 7. So a short summary. So we make a factor here and add 5 elements to this factor. Then we call the function here. Meaning it jumps from this location to the top. And as an input we pass factor phi, which is this factor here. So this factor is being copied into the factor numbers. Then all the numbers here are increased by 1 by using the for loop here. And then the function returns all the numbers. And the return value here is being copied into this factor here. So in the factor phi increased. And then we call the function print numbers. And we pass the factor phi increased. Meaning the numbers here in this factor are being copied into this factor here. And in this for loop here, it prints all the numbers in the factor. So that's it for this video. In this video, we have seen how to write functions to firstly increase all the numbers by 1 in the factor, and finally to print the numbers in a factor.